And we went and looked back through vote histories over many years, many administrations, and we were only able to find two examples in recent history where the majority leader and the president broke ranks and went in different, voted in opposite. They usually don't do that. They want to support each other as the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party really votes in a very, very strong bloc. It's one of their strengths as a party.
Welcome, everybody, into another episode of Coinage, exploring a huge, don't call it a comeback. I don't think that's the right word to use here. It's an absolutely shocking dismantling of the anti-crypto army. Not only a huge rebuke of the SEC's anti-crypto stance last week, but now huge pro-crypto bills being voted on in the House and expected to pass again with flying colors. And for more on that, I want to bring on Digital Chamber founder Perianne back on Coinage. Perianne, it's good to see you again.
Hey, Zach, good to be back.
I kind of want to just start by, applauding you and the work that the Digital Chamber's done, because last week was wild. It was fun to watch play out in real time, and you were down in D.C. watching with a few different congressmen and women around all this. What did you make of it? I mean, it seems like there is a huge shift right now underway in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, it's really incredible just to watch how quickly the tides can shift in crypto policy. I mean, the past couple of years, we've been subjected to a lot of political agendas that have been put forward on the industry, and I think we're getting back to sophisticated policy making, using logic and reason and facts and data to guide the decisions that are happening across the Congress, the regulators, and so on and so forth. But last week with the the SOB 121 vote was really an incredible time. So we were hosting our annual conference that happened on Wednesday, the DC Blockchain Summit. And then Thursday was Blockchain Education Day, where we bring all of our members. We had over 100 companies with us. We went to Capitol Hill and we went to go meet with our congressional representatives to urge them to support, pro-crypto, pro-digital asset legislation. And on that same day, the SOB 121 bill was up for a vote in the Senate, but a lot of incredible just things happened. So it was voted in the House the week before. Before it came for a vote, the White House, President Biden, issued a public statement with an intent to veto. So they said, we will be vetoing this bill if it comes to the president's desk. The president will not sign this bill. Which was really a message to Democrats of hey, vote no for this thing. That's really what it was. Despite that, there were dozens of congressmen that voted in support of the bill in the House that week prior. So last week it came over to the Senate and it came for a floor vote in the Senate, and 12 Democrats voted in support. And the big surprise was that Chuck Schumer had voted in support of the bill. Chuck Schumer is the Senate Majority Leader, and he voted last. He waited till the very, very end. He let everybody else go, and he voted at the very end. And I think if he had gone earlier, and many other Democrats had seen that he had voted yes, the outcome could have even looked even different. But as soon as the vote was final, we had Senator Lummis, who was the sponsor of the bill. She put out a statement saying this was really historic. And the reason why she is saying that is because we are in such a partisan divide in the U.S. Senate. Most votes are very, very close. They're 49 to 51. Pretty much most votes are, at least once on policy, not necessarily nominations. But it's really, really unusual that you would have 60 plus votes, especially for something like digital assets, which has probably been one of the most controversial things in front of the US Congress over the past couple of years. And then Schumer is really important because he is the second most powerful member of the Democratic Party, only second to President Biden himself. And we went and looked back through vote histories over many years, many administrations, and we were only able to find two examples in recent history where the majority leader and the president broke ranks and went in different, voted in opposite. They usually don't do that. They want to support each other as the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party really votes in a very, very strong bloc. It's one of their strengths as a party. So to have so many break and vote in support of a bill that mostly Republicans were voting for, really is signaling these tectonic shifts that are happening in crypto policy today.
Yeah, no, it was historic and it was wild to see play out. And I think from a few key Democrats, we also heard them kind of say that they wanted to send a message. I do wonder, I guess, how much of it, in terms of the Schumer vote, how much of that might be also just dissatisfaction and kind of annoyance from banks who wanted to play a part of this too. Obviously, Chuck Schumer being from New York, we saw Gillibrand also be one of the senators that broke from the Democrat Party as well in her voting. Obviously, she's worked with Senator Lomas as well. But I mean, when you look at it, how much of it is banks like that dissatisfaction of not being able to touch crypto versus perhaps a democratic shift in being pro-crypto? I suppose that's what we're going to find out with the House vote today.
Yeah, it's a really good question. What led to so many Democrats voting in favor of SOB 121? And I think there's really three factors that were at play. One was wanting to support the nation being a technical leader in advanced technologies, including blockchain. So that U.S. competitiveness argument is one. The second argument is this was a Congressional Review Act bill. What that means is that what was in the bill, the language in the bill, was essentially nullifying or reversing a rule that the Securities and Exchange Commission had written and put into requirement, in this case for banks, regarding the custody of digital assets. The Government Accountability Office, what spurred this whole thing last year, the GAO, or the Government Accountability Office, had put out a note that said the Securities and Exchange Commission had violated the Administrative Procedures Act in the way they were putting this rule on industry. And because they didn't follow the rules that applied to the agency, then Congress can nullify the rule. So you're kind of like, scolding the regulator a little bit, saying, hey, you did this wrong. You did this incorrectly. A big part of it was about process. And, one, in a court of law, these APA violations are very difficult for the agency to defend. It's pretty black and white. Had this gone into litigation, or if this does go into litigation, it's a pretty clear case. I think there's very, very good, facts for this to be challenged. So part of it is a process. And the other thing, I don't think there's any member of Congress, it doesn't really matter what side of the aisle you're on, that want to go on record saying, yeah, it's okay if the regulators don't follow the rules. Like, that's just not really it's not a good sign. And then the third is, the banks were in support of this as well, because of course it applied to banks. And so you did note there were a number of members from New York, where a lot of the banks are headquartered, saying it is important that banks can be innovative, that they can offer innovative products, that they can compete globally, and that our most regulated institutions can offer custody services for digital asset participants. So that was kind of the third piece. So there were really three factors. I think it really depends on the member of which one resonated with them the most, but that's all what was going in favor of such a strong vote for the repeal of SOB 121 last week.
And you mentioned, I guess, the historic nature of the president and the Senate Majority Leader of the same party kind of breaking on a vote like this. The other thing hanging over everyone's head now is that it's passed the House and the Senate. So the question is, will Biden follow through on his threat to veto it? And people are watching that, and he's got a limited amount of days to kind of do it. I wonder where you sit on whether or not that's going to happen.
That is the question we're all asking, and we're all watching, and we're all waiting for. We are encouraging all Americans to call the White House and encourage the president to sign this bill into law. He did come out with the intent to veto. They already said they would veto. But this has passed with bipartisan support in both the House and Senate. And given that the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, has voted in favor of the bill, I would assume that the White House is revisiting this intent to veto. And then it's also worth noting that there was not an intent to veto issued today for the FIT Act, the Fit for the 21st Century Act, which is probably even a more divisive bill, just because it's so much longer. This is a comprehensive regulatory bill, so there's so many other things that members could debate or disagree on. SOB 121 is very short, very straightforward, kind of a lot less to debate in terms of policy. That's that you have the bill on the screen there. So
this is I wonder if that's like a way to read this too, though, in terms of how far off the White House is backing away, right? Because you talked about the threat to veto. Now ahead of this House vote, Fit 21 basically coming out and saying, look, we don't like it, maybe, and we want a path to help regulate crypto in the U.S., but we're not going to threaten to veto this one. I mean, I would take that as, again, a huge retreat in the battlefield.
I think so. So I do think there is a very real chance that we can make this repeal or the nullification of Psalm 121 law. It really comes down to what the White House is going to do. And there's a couple other ways they could do it. So the president can obviously sign the bill into law. That's what we're urging him to do. That's what we're urging you to do, to call the president and tell him to sign
Yes.
this into law. If we can put enough pressure on the White House, I think we can make this happen. Another thing that they could do is they could veto the bill as they originally said and kind of save face on their original position, but then they could kind of maybe quietly go back to the SEC and say, you need to just pull this yourself. Don't, like, we can sign the bill into law and we'll force it, or you can do it yourself. So that is another potential outcome as well. But we'll know very soon. And last resort would be a lawsuit. There's absolutely standing for a lawsuit here. So even if this were to get vetoed, the fight is very, very, very far from being over.
No, it really did. I mean, I said this when we were watching it all play out, aside from applauding you and your work at the Digital Chamber for kind of getting us to this turning point, but also just calling out, I think it's the beginning of the fight in the way that this really feels like it's turned, because now as we watch Fit 21, which I guess would be a good turning point to get your take on this whole legislation, I'm kind of curious if you feel like this is, a groundswell of shifting of bipartisan support for crypto. There are some reports that Nancy Pelosi is going to vote for this. I mean, what are you watching for in the way that this vote shakes out? Is it the number of Democrats? Because I think it was 21 last time around in the House for Sob 121. What are you looking for in terms of, I guess, judging things this time?
Yeah, is it going to be 5, 10 Democrats that vote? We know we have a handful because there's already a number of Democrats that have gone on record saying they support the bill. Is it going to be, a handful, 5, 10, or is it going to be like 50? If you have 50, 60, 70 members of the Democratic Party that vote in favor of FIT, that's going to put absolutely tremendous support behind pushing this through the legislative process. There's a couple of things that are important to really understand about this bill, the Fit for the 21st Century Act. This was created by the House Financial Services and the House Ag Committee. This is obviously already voted out of committee. It actually passed through a voice vote in the Ag Committee, so unanimous support. So it's already passed through the respective committees with very real bipartisan support behind it. So it's teed up very well for a floor vote today for more bipartisan support. But we don't have an equivalent bill on the Senate side. So it is unclear what happens today after the House passes this. This is going to pass out of the House. We know we have the votes to get it through the House, but it's unclear what's going to happen on the Senate side. There has not been a member that's kind of stood up and said, I'm going to take FIT, introduce it in the Senate, and get it through the Senate. So that's another thing as industry we need to be vocal on, is encouraging the Senate to take up the bill as well. If not, if it only passes through the House, then that is where it will end. And businesses need this clarity today to be able to build and invest now in the United States.
Yeah.
So there's not a Senate companion bill. There's not a clear path to what it's going to be on the Senate right now. And it is important that people are vocalizing, we need to get this through the full process. The Senate needs to take this up quickly so we can get it done this year.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned clarity, because I feel like that's, again, what everyone in this space wants. And again, me as a founder in a crypto media company, Web3 media company, has been looking for in terms of this. You were just chatting with SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce at your guys' conference, kind of about how politics has bled into the way that the SEC has been running this. People basically are connecting the dots between what happened in Sob 121 last week, potentially this House vote now, and the SEC's shift to all of a sudden look like they're going to approve Ethereum ETFs. I want to play what we chatted with Hester Peirce back in January. This was a clip that I think more people have been paying attention to as this has shifted, because she predicted kind of that the SEC wouldn't repeat the mistakes, that it had to get sued, had to go to court, that Grayscale had to win their appeal to get Bitcoin ETFs. This is what she told us back in January. I want to play her clip about maybe the SEC not repeating those mistakes, and then get your take on the other side. Take a listen. The hardest thing to square is, if it was only the case that Bitcoin ETFs got approved because of a court ruling specifically about Bitcoin ETF applicants, does that mean that, in your reading, that's going to have to happen to have an ETH ETF approved.
Another court case?
Yes, and an appeal and the whole process and, the battle.
That's not how we're going to do our approvals. As I've said through this process, what we need to be doing is we need to just be applying regular way consideration to these products, the same kind of consideration that we apply to similar products. And so we shouldn't need a court to tell us that our approach is arbitrary and capricious in order for.
So there you go. I mean, I think, if last week's vote, Perianne, was a rebuke of the way the SEC has been run, I think that the FIT 21 bill is maybe perhaps a doubling down on that and saying, look, we need an alternate pathway for crypto to exist in the U.S. I mean, what do you make of what you said there and the politicization of the SEC now?
Yeah, well, another tidbit on the SEC is the SEC has come out and said they do not agree with they've come out in opposition to FIT 21 in advance of the vote today. And one of the things that they mentioned in their statement is because 60 days, the SEC would give 60 days to do the decentralization test. And they're saying that's not enough time. So something you should know is that it originally was 30 days. And there was a lot of negotiation that happened between the various stakeholders to increase that to 60 days. So despite, that consideration being taken into the bill text, the SEC is still coming out in opposition to the bill. What Commissioner Peirce is talking about is how the agency has now been subjected to politics. And that's not really how the Securities and Exchange Commission used to be run. And this goes for all the financial regulators, because I think at this point, most of them are subjected to political whims. A lot of the people serving as commissioners are not market experts. They're not people that's worked in the markets. They're politically appointed to effectuate a political agenda. But that's not how it's supposed to be. The SEC in particular was drafted, the authority Congress gave it is to be a disclosure regulator, meaning if companies provide the appropriate disclosures that they're required to, they should be allowed to go to market, and it's the Securities and Exchange Commission's job to make sure that's done correctly. They're not supposed to be a merit regulator where they go on and say, but, even though you filled out all your paperwork correctly, we don't really like you, or we don't really like this whole crypto stuff, so we're going to get in the way and prevent new things from coming to market. And that's exactly why the SEC was found guilty of being arbitrary and capricious in the way it was handling its spot Bitcoin ETF application. So I am a massive proponent of making the SEC and all the regulators non-political again, getting back to disclosures, getting back to, overseeing the markets and not allowing politics to dictate the important decisions that these regulators have to make.
Yeah, I know. I know you got to jump, but we had Travis Kling on the show yesterday, and he was saying that last week was probably the most historic week, the biggest week in crypto's history. I'm not sure if you agree with that, but
it was definitely a very big week, and I was grateful to be on the ground to be a part of all of it. It was truly incredible.
Well, I know I speak for everybody here at Coinage when we say thank you for your hard work down in D.C. It's exciting to see all the fruits of your labor now play out, and we'll see how the vote goes today. But clearly, a lot going on and a lot to celebrate. Perianne Boring, the founder of Digital Chamber, appreciate you coming back on.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, we'll see you soon. That's going to do it for another episode of Coinage. Check out all the big headlines at coinage.media and join our project there to co-own the fastest growing Web3 media outlet. That's going to do it for Perianne, for myself. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you again soon.